Welcome to the Happy Home Birth Podcast, your source for positive natural childbirth stories and your community of support, education, and encouragement in all things home birth and motherhood. What's the best way to enter birth? Is it with a completely blank slate, not allowing the stories of others to influence your own experience? Or is there benefit to listening to the raw stories of others, the gamut of experiences to know what's possible? Hey there, happy home birthers, and welcome to this week's episode of the Happy Home Birth Podcast. I'm your host, Caitlin Fusco, and this week we are speaking to Dr. Elliot Berlin, who we last spoke to on episode 229, titled Have an Informed Pregnancy with Dr. Elliot Berlin. Now, for those of you who have not yet heard of this champion of birth education, let me introduce him. Dr. Berlin is an award-winning prenatal chiropractor, childbirth educator, labor support bodyworker, filmmaker, co-founder of Berlin Wellness Group in Los Angeles, California, and the host of the Informed Pregnancy podcast. Dr. Berlin graduated Summa Cum Laude from Life University of Chiropractic in Atlanta, Georgia, and the Atlanta School of Massage. Dr. Berlin's Informed Pregnancy Project aims to utilize multiple forms of media, so podcasts, YouTube series, documentaries, and online workshops to compile and deliver unbiased information about pregnancy and childbirth to empower new and expectant parents to make informed choices regarding their parenting and pregnancy journey. Dr. Berlin lives in Los Angeles with his wife, perinatal psychologist Dr. Alyssa Berlin, and their 4 fantastic kids. All right, let's waste no time and dive in. Please remember that the opinions of my guest may not necessarily reflect my own and vice versa. And the show is not medical advice, it's an educational tool. So continue to take empowered responsibility for your health and your family. Dr. Berlin, thank you so much for coming back on the Happy Home Birth Podcast.
Caitlin, thanks for having me back. There's nothing I like more than a good back. A Cairo humor.
I love Cairo humor. That is just it's its own little niche joke set. That's beautiful.
Oh, thank you. Dad Cairo humor, even more niche.
Oh, wow. Well, it has been a while since we've had you on, and you have been up to a lot of really amazing stuff. I cannot wait to get into all of it. For anyone who didn't hear our first interview together, would you mind taking just a moment to introduce yourself, your business, your what it is that you do to the listeners?
Well, back in 1974, it was a balmy night when I was born. And more recently, I am a chiropractor. I focus primarily on pregnancy, birth, and postpartum, and a little bit of general chiropractic. My wife is a psychologist who focuses on the same demographic, so we work together in a mind-body kind of way. We got started in this world with our own fertility struggle that we overcame naturally when medicine failed us. And then we started helping a lot of other people overcome their fertility struggles. And before you knew it, we were a pregnancy practice. And then they were giving birth. So we were a birth practice. And then they were postpartum. So we became a postpartum practice. Along the way, you just pick up a lot of stuff. I come from a very medical background. So when people were asking me questions about VBAC and other natural childbirth things, I really had no idea. So I did research. I am a research kind of guy. And I would come up with options, choices, and answers for them, and then realize I'm getting the same questions over and over again. So if I could sort of structure those answers in a way that could be accessible to other people who have the questions, even ones not coming through our practice, that would be ideal. So we did a blog for a while, then a magazine for a while in print, and then I found this podcast format 15 years ago before it was cool, and we've been podcasting ever since. And so we have our Informed Pregnancy podcast, and then a little spin-off that we'll talk about today called One Way or a Mother. And I made a couple of documentaries, one about vaginal birth after cesarean called Trial of Labor, and one about delivering breech babies vaginally called Heads Up, the disappearing art of vaginal breech delivery. When I realized birth documentaries don't really have an easy way to be found and seen, I created a streaming platform called Informed Pregnancy Plus. We create a lot of our own content on there and also license a lot of the popular and sometimes less popular content and have it all in one place with apps for easy accessibility on Apple, Android, Roku, Apple TV, and so on. And try to make it super accessible and affordable for anyone who wants to get information and get empowered.
You seem to be a solutions oriented kind of guy.
I
you
mean,
know?
I think men in general, if I can generalize, we like to be problem solvers.
Yeah.
Sometimes in a way that's helpful, and sometimes in a way that isn't. But I feel like there's a lack of knowledge, which causes a lack of empowerment
Mm.
around this space. And just watching over and over again people who, especially earlier in my career, would just spend their whole pregnancy doing yoga and drinking really thick, green, juicy stuff and all the things that should lead to a great, healthy, happy birth. And then it gets derailed one way or another. And you start to see patterns and you start to realize that if you fall into the pattern, I can almost, if the betting markets had their way, I could predict the outcome. And so by giving that information and changing the pattern, the betting markets will start to bet with you instead of bet against you. And that's what I'm trying to do.
Incredible. It really is just amazing, all of these different things that you've put together to provide this information. And goodness, 15 years, I didn't realize that you'd been doing it for 15 years. That really is, that was the pioneering days of the podcasting world.
Yeah, before, I mean, now, thank goodness there's a lot of great content, and it's a lot easier to do. I had no
Mhm.
idea when we got started. I actually started by finding a studio in Venice, California. It was a brand new state of the art modern studio, and I was renting space there. I'm like, oh, that's kind of expensive for the hourly rate, but we're just doing a 45-minute podcast. What could possibly go wrong? And then I realized, like, waiting for my guests to get there, we're paying for studio time, and then we do it. And then, one gets called out and needs 20 minutes because I'm interviewing these doctors. And then every minute of editing that the sound engineer would do is you're paying the studio rate as well, not just the editor. And I think my first episode cost $1,500 to make,
You're kidding.
and so I made four that year. I got it down. I was so happy. I got it down to $800 an episode, almost
Woo.
half. And now you could just do it from your closet. So
Hmm. Beautiful, beautiful. Wow. So you have seen and heard a lot of things. With having been in the birth world for such a long time. You have watched all of these people have these experiences, and you are certainly well informed, especially since that's the name of the podcast. Well
yeah.
informed on, the birthing process and what it is that mothers and families are going through in this process. I'm sure that, like you said, you see these kind of pitfalls that can occur, and I'm sure in a lot of situations it's this lack of understanding, or this lack of recognizing what our options are. And so you have come up with a solution for that in providing all of these resources. And really, that's one of the things that I want to focus on today is the resource of storytelling. you know I know that with my podcast, that's what our focus is. We have these mothers come on and share these birth stories, and you have the same thing on your podcast. And I'm curious because sometimes there becomes this concern of, well, do I should I listen to these stories? Is this helpful? Is this harmful? And I want us to dive into that, into this idea of storytelling. So let's kind of start with this big picture question of listening to other people's stories in pregnancy. What are your thoughts about listening to other people's stories, and do you think that some stories are how do you determine what's a good one to listen to?
Yeah, it's hard, and I think it's really different from person to person. I think that our modern time is an interesting time. If we could go back maybe 100 years or just a drop further, you see that families lived closer together. Sometimes on a family property where your whole family was there, all your grandparents and your aunts and uncles and cousins, and it was a little bit communal. And so when people from your community were pregnant, you were around the pregnancy, witnessed it. In fact, you might have even been called to help support your pregnant relative. Same for birth. You would just see the birth. It would just be there on the property at the home. and you would see it. And then same for postpartum and breastfeeding. And so you had experiences, you had stories, real life experiences, just as nature would have them, meaning sometimes they were probably awesome experiences, sometimes they were probably scary or harrowing experiences, but you had the full complement of experiences. You knew what you were getting into when you got pregnant and what was ahead for the birth and postpartum, and you had support. And that's a very different situation than today, where most people have moved away from their families, don't live on a family property, and aren't exposed to pregnancy, birth, and postpartum the same way, and don't have the same kind of help from the community like we once had. So, to some extent, the help is replaced by hired help, hiring a childbirth educator to teach me all about the end of pregnancy and birth, and hiring a doula to help me and support me through the birth or through postpartum, hiring a lactation educator, or a lactation consultant or facilitator. So that's going to be someone who helps me with my nursing and my feeding. And again, those were all just kind of built in. And now we can hire those people because we don't have them built in anymore. But when it comes to exposure to what to expect, I think that that's been replaced in large part by media.
Mm-hmm.
And what you see on TV and in movies and what you read in newspaper headlines, or even people's stories that they love to tell at the water cooler, it's very skewed. It's not really, especially the TV, movies, and newspapers, it's not really a great reflection of reality. And so you kind of get to birth with a already very skewed vision of what it might be. And I think that if you have bad information going in, then you make bad choices, or choices bad on information that may not be the choice you would make if you had better information. So, for that reason, I think, look, on Informed Pregnancy, on our podcast, the Informed Pregnancy podcast, we have a lot of different types of episodes. Some of them are experts just coming on and talking, let's talk about gestational diabetes, or let's talk about preeclampsia. And those are very informational. But then we have stories. We have birth stories. The most popular of our birth stories are before and after birth stories. Well, I interview somebody before they have their baby about the pregnancy and about the birth that they're planning for, they're thinking about, wanting to have, aiming towards, and then after they have the baby, coming back and sharing the birth experience they actually had. And those are among the most popular episodes. The supremely popular ones are when we do that with a celebrity that people kind of can relate to. But even just anybody who wants to share their story, people tune in and want to hear the stories. And even when I'm recording the stories, sometimes they're pretty challenging birth experiences, even after quote unquote doing everything right. And so it becomes this question for the listener: do I want to hear a story that didn't go amazing? Or do I even want to hear a story that did go amazing? Like, do I want somebody else's experience in my mind and on my journey with me? Or do I just want to have a blank canvas and create my own experience? So if I think about all those factors together, I think it ideally would be nice to just have your own experience on a blank canvas. But I think if you're not informed, you don't have any power towards directing yourself to the birth experience you would want to have. So because we're not exposed to it on the family property anymore, I think it is helpful to get insight from other people's stories. And I think women feel that and listen to the podcasts with the stories for that reason. Whether or not to listen to just positive ones or the full complement of stories, probably a more personal choice, and probably for some people better to go one way and for some people better to go the other way. I don't have a great way to advise on that other than the fact that I think you can learn from both. And it's probably, for many people, it's, if not most, it's probably good to not sugarcoat it and only assume it's going to go this way, but to really learn from it. And so when someone shares their before and after birth story, what we're really trying to get out of that is, what did you learn from the experience that you could have only learned from going through it, and could you please share that with us and with our audience? So when it comes to listening to stories, I think there's a lot of value in it for most people, especially stories that go well. And I also think for most people, but maybe not all, value in listening to stories that didn't go according to plan and that were challenging or worse. And so that's why we started the new podcast, which, one way or another came from that feedback from the focus groups. And what they wanted was more detail, more in depth, take me deeper into a story, especially if it's a more complex story. If we have a 45-hour birth and we tell that story in 45 minutes, 1 minute per birth hour, which is not a lot. And you're really just getting bullet points sometimes. And we took that feedback and we thought it through and decided to take more intricate stories and tell them in a different way. And so in season one, which is just recently out, we have a mom. Her name is Ariana, and she's extremely dynamic. And her first birth was a very big surprise. She was planning for all natural, and it didn't go that way. And notably, didn't plan at all for it to not go that way. And so I think that took her by extra surprise and was a bit shocking on her mind, body, and spirit. We catch up with her pregnant again the second time and really just doing work through the pregnancy to try to process her first birth experience and to try to pave the way for a better experience the second time around. And we interview her and her partner, and we interview her doctor and midwife, and we interview her doula and her Reiki practitioner and her mom, and we get into all sorts of ancestral stuff, and we weave it together into a highly produced, almost audio docu series. And each season is just one story. And boy, do we take you deep into it. I kind of modeled it after, to a degree, the Serial podcast, which is, similar in structure and format. In fact, I originally was going to call it Baby Serial. But I didn't want to get sued, so we called it One Way or a Mother. And it's a brand new way of storytelling that I had no experience with. It's much more involved and detailed in a million different ways than the stories we tell on informed pregnancy. And it took a long time she was actually having her next baby when this season came out about her last pregnancy. I'm pleased to say that all the hard work paid off. It came out really great. I'm very proud of it, and all the people that worked on it are just incredible, passionate people, a big team of people. And we dropped 3 episodes at the beginning, and then one a week until the whole season was done. And I was getting so many messages saying, "You got to send me the next one or the next two. I can't wait a whole week." Like my mom was like, "Come on, if I get anything, I need some Protexia here. Send me the next episode." Even Ariana called me at one point. She's like, "I want to hear the next one. This is so good." I'm like, "It's your story. You know what happens,
You lived this.
Yeah. And I guess you don't remember all the details sometimes afterwards. So really proud of how that came out. Now we're working on season two, which is an even, I think, just more unique story. Ariana's story is unfortunately not too rare, but the next one is a very interesting, if I could spill the beans, best friend surrogacy story.
Wow.
And we're simultaneously working on season three, which is an even more unique and rare story. I don't know how we're going to top it for season four, but we'll have some time to think about it.
Wow. This is incredible. One of the things that's sticking out to me is the way that you are structuring this is you can't sugarcoat it. Even in the informed pregnancy podcast where you do these before and afters, you are already providing the before. You're providing what they are hoping for, what the desire is. You've selected your person before their birthing experience. And so, there has to be a follow-up. We have to find out what happened. And then with that, it allows people to experience the truth unchanged. You're not picking, oh, well, I'm only going to pick these really, really great, beautiful, perfect birth stories. I'm sharing true life.
And I think we sort of tell everybody who agrees to share their story in that way that from the beginning, like, we don't know how your story is going to end, and we try to select people who are comfortable and confident sharing it however it it goes. Once in a blue moon, we'll get somebody who just after they actually have the baby, they're just like, "Oh, I don't want to share that story."
Hmm.
And you know, sometimes I'll a year later I'll check in and be like, maybe you want to share it now. I think there's value in them sharing it, and I think there's value in it being heard. But I think our first taste of that was Trial of Labor, which is our VBAC film. And I met with a producer, with a director. He was a DP, and this is his directorial debut, actually. He was director of photography for other films. And he's really talented. The film came out. It's just a beautiful film. And we just put out like a casting call, but not even to make the film, just like, would you come share your C-section story or your VBAC story? And we had four women who came who were pregnant on the journey to a VBAC after one or more previous cesarean, unplanned cesarean. And after we heard their stories, we were just trying to see, is there a film to tell? Is there a story to tell here in this way? And we're not planning to make it anytime soon. But after those particular four women shared their story, we're like, oh my God, there's a story we must tell. And it's their stories that we must tell. But they were all like halfway through the pregnancy or more. So we had very little time to put together. Normally, we would do, a budget and raise funds for it and storyboard it. And we had none of that. We just jumped in hardcore with whatever we can pull together. And, they're all on a VBAC journey. We had no idea how it was going to end. Would all four of them end with vaginal birth? Would all four of them end in repeat cesareans or something in between? And we realized that very early on, and we just said, no matter how it goes, we're gonna tell the story. I don't want to give a spoiler here, but that film is streaming on Informed Pregnancy Plus, and anybody can access it.
Everybody go to the show notes and click on the link
Ah,
because you're going to want to watch that one.
perfect. Thank you. And so now we're doing these stories on Informed Pregnancy Plus. We have a series called Growing. Our first person that we're following through her entire pregnancy. I mean, she had
Mm,
a very easy fertility, very easy pregnancy with her first baby, and then a very rough birth and postpartum and
mm.
fertility struggle, secondary infertility. And we catch up with her just as she's pregnant, finally, you know, and she's been in fight or flight mode for 3 years
Wow.
from the birth, from the postpartum. She had lactation issues, fertility issues, and we're trying to find a path for her as well to a better story for her second time around. And that one's video, so it's on Informed Pregnancy Plus. It's a video series with a lot of pictures and video that really highlight and illustrate what she's been through and what she's going through now. But we have no idea how it'll end, and we already started the second growing story. And it's every other week we're sharing what's happening now, and it's totally unpredictable. And again, we for both of them, they're in progress. We won't know how they end until they end, but the story is already being told. Uh, and so I think that's important. It forces us to keep things real.
Exactly. That is incredible. And it really goes back to what you said in the beginning, where, you know, just 100 years ago or a smidge over, we're living together, we're seeing these experiences, some of them beautiful, some of them very difficult, and seeing the gamut of that. And it seems like that's really what you're doing with these stories as well is look, I'm showing you what's happening. I don't know the end, just like none of us can know the end of our own experience, and being able to follow along with that and just to relate to the realness of that.
Yeah, I think also one of the things on Trial of Labor that's interesting, maybe for your audience, is one of those moms is doing an H back
Mhm.
or aiming for an H back, and which I always thought was a weird term because I guess VBAC is vaginal birth after cesarean. HBAC is home birth after cesarean. But the baby's not coming out of the house. It's still a vaginal birth. It's just it should be maybe HVBAC or something like that. But anyway, there's one of those in there, and she is such a powerful storyteller, just real and raw storytelling from the heart. Like she has open book, and it's that her story on there is really, really powerful.
Mm. This is just, it's so wonderful, all of the things that you're creating for people to be able to listen to and experience as they prepare, and to provide for the gap that's missing. And one of the things that you mentioned earlier was the idea of, now, because we don't have the same type of kind of community, familial community that we did in the past, we can hire these people out. But I think that even more so, and what has happened in the past in this gap of time, is we've looked to the experts and just kind of said, oh, well, you tell me what this is supposed to be and how this is supposed to go. And now, with things like the Informed Pregnancy podcast and all of the resources that you're creating, people are able to start seeing more of the variation and more of the options. But for so long, I do feel like it was, okay, well, I don't have anybody to tell me what this is going to be like or how to prepare. And so I'm at the mercy of whoever my doctor happens to be.
I mean, you're so right. It's who is my doctor? What is my birthplace? So there's a lot of people that are making decisions around your experience, around your healthcare and your baby's healthcare, that have their own things to consider. And
Mhm.
I'm not saying that in an ominous way or a bad way. I'm just saying people are people. So if I'm a hospital facility, I might put restrictions in place on things that you can or can't do during your own childbirth because of my liability, risk to me as a birth facility. And liability risk to a provider is different than medical risk, and they're not always proportional. So just because liability goes up doesn't mean medical risk goes up. But for that provider, whether it's a hospital or a doctor or somebody else, if the risk is going to go up for them, they'd rather kind of navigate you towards other options that don't have as much liability for them. Now, it may not be the experience you chose if you could choose any experience in the world, right? So, even just what we were talking about, vaginal birth after cesarean, some doctors or some hospitals don't want to take on clients who want to do a VBAC because there is potentially more liability for them. There is some medical risk as well. That, in my mind, should be a conversation between the provider and the patient. These are the pros and cons. These are the risks and benefits as we know them. Which choice would you like to make? But as a business person or a person, a provider who has their own life, they have to also make those calculations regarding liability. And if there's more liability for a VBAC and less for a C-section, they may be only inclined to offer you the repeat cesarean and not the VBAC. And that you just see that happening a lot. And it's one example of many things. Like, why can't you eat when you're in labor at most hospitals? That's, I think if you just were an animal giving birth, and I say that, but we were just animals giving birth, mammals giving birth at home not that long ago. I think if you were hungry, you ate, and if you weren't hungry, you didn't eat. It wasn't somebody telling you can or you can't eat, or you must eat this or you can't eat that. And so, why are those decisions being made? They're sometimes made with good intentions for you, and sometimes there's generalizations like most people will do better this way, so we're going to make sure everybody does it that way. And your choice is taken away for that reason. If you don't know the factors that are involved in these decisions and what the options could be and what the pros and cons, and if nobody tells you them, you're just going to get swept up in the system. Your choices won't be yours to make. I've come across patients over the years who actually like that. They don't want to make any decisions. They don't want the responsibility, and they don't want to do the work to find out what the options are and the pros and cons. They just want to find a provider that they like and that they trust, and for that provider to tell them, this is how we're going to do it. And that's okay. If you're that person, by all means, that's a way for you to go. But if you're somebody who likes to know what the choices are and wants to steer the journey in a particular direction, you're going to have to find out oftentimes on your own to get informed on your own so that when you go have a conversation with a doctor or with a birth place like a hospital or birth center, and in order for you to have a meaningful conversation where you're also steering the ship, or primarily steering the ship would be even nicer, then you're going to have that information on your own. And sources like what you do, Caitlin, Happy Home Birth, your podcast and your platform, and what I do. I mean, we're partners in the same puzzle of just trying to compile and release information in ways that are well balanced and as unbiased as possible and easy to digest. And then people can take that, and when you go have like, should I be induced or not, you'll be able to be an informed part of that conversation, decision maker on your own experience.
Yes. I think it's really interesting. You just said well balanced. I was thinking about the fact that we do have this, this medical side where there is a narrative that birth is this one way generally, and it's dangerous and it's risky. And this is why you should do it my way. And I'm in charge, and this is how I'm going to do it. The other side of that is Instagram, you know, or these social media platforms where we're seeing the highlight reels of especially home births. You want to show off these beautiful experiences that you've had. And so we'll see beautiful birth aesthetics and this lovely music in the background, and it's all good and it's all perfect. Have you noticed that causing any confusion or trouble for anyone on the other end?
Well, I think last year when it came to my New Year's resolution, my resolution was I'd like to be more like Facebook me, because he's like 20 pounds lighter and he has the best relationship ever with his wife and kids. Life is so good for him that I just want to be more like him. And so I think that we know that Instagram is not reality, and you'll kind of have to take things that you see on there in context and assume that there's more to the story. And so that's where it comes to, if we're just sharing stories real and raw, you have to decide from yourself, do you want the highly, sugar coated version of it? Or do you want to take in the full spectrum of possibilities? And that's why I think you're right. Well balanced is important. What you said about, the medical side is pretty interesting to me. On Informed Pregnancy, we have an episode number 147, and my guest is Dr. Jennifer Lang. And it's called Prenatal Nutrition because she wrote a book on it. But it's really interesting. She's an OBGYN, and she shares her story as well. And with her first pregnancy, she had scheduled a C section for herself. She was young, strong, healthy, brilliant. And somewhere in the pregnancy, I think in the early second trimester, she was doing surgery, gynecological surgery, and the attending that was there doing the surgery with her was an older guy, and he didn't know her birth plan, and they're just doing the surgery, and he's talking to her, and he says the weirdest thing. He's like, "Isn't it a whole lot better to be doing surgery than having surgery?" And they can only see each other's eyes because there's surgical masks, and she like froze for a second because it hit home hard. And she said, like, she finished the surgery and went home, and for the next couple of nights it was this sort of debate going on in her mind, like, why am I having surgery by choice? The way she put it to me is, if there is a functional door, why am I carving a hole in the sheetrock, right? And she said it didn't come down to fear of things that she's seen happen in childbirth. Like, I've seen these terrible things that I'm afraid of happening to me. It wasn't really about that. She said actually it was more the way she was trained. She realized that in medical school, the training is things, we can't trust nature. Things are gonna go wrong. It's gonna be a train wreck, and we just have to intervene as early and often as possible to save the day, to make sure things don't go south. And she's like, it was that approach that made her like not want to go down that on that ride at all, just to have the surgery. And even with the surgery, she said, like, when I do a C-section, it's kind of like going camping for, for the first time with a brand new tent. And I take out the tent, and it's exciting. We have our 3-day camping trip, and then at the end I take down my tent and I go to try to stuff it back into that carrying case that it comes with, And she's like, I can get it all in there, but it's not as it was, you know? And she said, like, I was doing that because I don't want to take the risks that are involved in this, dangerous thing called vaginal birth. And so she ended up going to do hypnotherapy and to do a long, powerful fear release session on hypnotherapy. And she kept listening to the recording from that session again and again. She decided to do a vaginal birth. And she has a really epic story that she shares. Again, that's episode 147 on informed pregnancy. I don't want to ruin the ending entirely, but here's the spoiler alert. She has her next two babies at home with a midwife.
Wow. Oh man. It is so interesting when we see these medical professionals who, do start asking questions and then for themselves making these different and informed choices. And I can't help but think that those experiences that she has had certainly have to impact the way that she operates now. And that was kind of a pun, but the way that she works, the way that she works with her patients in the hospital as an OBGYN, that has to change things.
Well, she became incredibly popular as an OB/GYN.
Mm.
Unfortunately, she was really using OB as a stepping stone to becoming a gynecological oncologist.
Oh,
And
wow.
so um, it got challenging for her to do both, and
Mhm.
you're in the middle of an ovarian surgery and your client's in labor. And she ended up stopping to do OB eventually. But it just gave me a little insight into how many doctors must think, if that's how they feel, even for herself. She's like, I think the best choice is just do a C-section, but I'll do this vaginal birth if you want to, but I got to be standing there hovering over the whole thing with tight boundaries to make sure nothing goes wrong. That's just the mindset and approach that sometimes medicine brings to childbirth, to
Mhm.
even, again, young, strong, healthy people who are pregnant and having babies. Let alone if you're one of your factors is, over the window, like you're over 35, heaven forbid, or something crazy like that, then it's
Something
even more
insane.
tight and guarded and nerve wracking.
Yes. Well, that combined with, like you said earlier, the media of, gosh, I remember when I was a kid, or not a kid, but, I adolescent. And if I would stay home on a sick day, I was going to be watching TLC's A Baby Story. And, just the drama of it all. And then the same with any movie, the labor is just shocking and it comes on out of nowhere and everybody's screaming and all of these things are happening. So when we pair those two things together, it's obvious, it's clear why so many people may just think, well, this is the best and only way. But then when there are resources like what you have created, all of these resources, man, it really does help steer the ship and show that there are other options. Not that you have to choose one particular way, but hey, just so you know, birth can be all of these different ways. And I'm here to show you what those are completely unfiltered in so many of these cases.
Yes. Yeah.
Wow. I'm so impressed, Dr. Berlin. I remember this from the last time that we spoke, that you shared just, just offhanded some of the projects that you were doing. And it is wild to me how much you accomplish. My real question is, how in the heck do you do all of this?
Well, I have to be honest. I think I've been working since I was very young, and I have a strong drive to work. I also was an EMT in college. I started being an EMT and I was volunteering. And even after college, I was volunteering all night and then working for an ambulance company during the day. And so I was used to kind of working around the clock. Um, that still didn't prepare me very well for the doula work that I did. That is insane work around the clock. Um, but really, I think one of the things that makes it possible for me to do all the different things that I do is my wife is really supportive and helpful in unimaginable ways. And, it's really been the backbone, I guess, pun intended, of our family and, taking care of the kids and being the anchor and support for the kids. That allowed me to do a lot of different things I've been able to do. So I always recommend if you want to get a lot done, You got to go find a great wife.
There you go. That is beautiful. Gosh, Dr. Berlin, I'm so excited to have all of these listeners know about Informed Pregnancy Plus and all of the different streaming options that they have. And one way or another, I'm going to end this conversation with you and go now to hear this. I'm so excited. How brilliant. What an amazing way to tell stories. This has been a blast. I just thank you so much for coming back on the Happy Home Birth podcast.
No, thanks, Caitlin, and thanks for the amazing work that you do. It's an honor to be here with you and be a part of your overall team.
Okay, did I mention how impressed I am with Dr. Berlin and all of the work he has put into providing resources for mothers and families? Truly, it overwhelms me how much he has created and the quality of that which he's created. So, as we jump into this week's episode roundup, I've got a few points I want to cover. First of all, the mainstream birth narrative is so outdated. And the fact that so many people are making fear based decisions because of what they've seen in the media is heartbreaking. To have resources like those that Dr. Berlin has created is such a blessing to so many. It's restoring the truth of what birth is for those who are curious and want to make informed decisions. Next, I love the rawness aspect of the content that Dr. Berlin is creating. He's not trying to paint a false picture of birth, not trying to make it scarier than it is, and also not trying to make it more idyllic than it is. His goal is to give an honest view of how this process unfolds and the many different ways that that can look and feel. And finally, I want to share with you a very special opportunity that Dr. Berlin has provided. He's giving a free month of Informed Pregnancy Plus, his streaming platform, to our listeners. There's a link below in the show notes, and this will expire on October 1st of 2025, so be sure to hop on this opportunity while you have it. Okay, my friends, that's all I've got for you for today. I'll see you back here next week. Thanks for listening to this week's episode. Are you looking to extend the home birth support, encouragement, and education? Join us in our Facebook group, Happy Home Birth Podcast Community, and check us out on Instagram at Happy Home Birth Podcast.